Okay, we can get started whenever.
Okay. Is everyone ready? Rohan, you good? Cool. Rough, everyone. Okay. Chinese autonomous weapons development is on the cusp of leapfrogging the U.S. Urgent action is needed. Barlick 611. Development and laws are accelerating. The stakes are high, and advantage can make a real difference in balance of power. Geopolitical game theory driving advancement. The military warning of Chinese might. Chinese technology may already be more advanced. China's investment is a key plank in its effort to usurp American military dominance. Two scenarios for war. First is U.S.-China war. Chinese laws growth causes nuclear war. They increase the risk of miscalculation and shred deterrence dynamics. Johnson 20. Proliferation laws have far-reaching implication for nuclear escalation. Even if for only conventional operation, proliferation could have destabilizing implication, increased risk of inadvertent nuclear escalation, exerting pressure to use them or lose them situation. Advances might increase perceived value that great powers attach to laws, making delegation of laws irresistible and destabilizing to capture the upper hand states. SU potential risk. Immature deployments would have severe consequences. Autonomous systems will complicate the ability of states to detect and attribute attacks. UAV and a swarming may overwhelm defense capabilities. Stealth may undermine your defensive preparation for swarm drones in the Middle East were infected, exposing U.S. systems. Endurance could increase the ability to survive countermeasure. China's more willing pre-delegating might severely challenge safety and credibility of nuclear weapons. The historical record is replete with near misses demonstrating the importance of human judgment and mitigating miscalculation. Risks remain underappreciated. China plan to incorporate swarm UAVs, emphasizing targeting U.S. aircraft carrier drone swarms will be well suited to preemptive attacks. Mere perception would elicit distrust, increasing uncertainty, triggering use them or losing undermining states' confidence in the survival of their second strike capabilities and triggering our first strike. If a state views a nuclear weapon to be at risk, drones will have destabilizing effect. Perception low will be destabilizing speed of AI, creating additional incentives to strike first and second is hard power cost. U.S. military spending high now, but China's law development is the largest threat to overturn American hard power dominance. They view wars inevitable. Will try to win the arms race at all costs. Brock 17. U.S. military spending towards the rest of the world. Technological superiority continues to constrain China using modernization to level the field. Russia will not achieve this goal. China practices development of lethal autonomous weapons. China views laws differently than the United States. China asserts war with the United States inevitable. China uses unrestricted warfare with no moral concern the use of lethal autonomous weapons system. This belief stems from U.S. concern protecting innocent lives. The consequences will result in the U.S. being forced to fight nations war with outdated technology. China seeks a revolution. Biological human constraints will no longer remain relevant. Otherwise, risk great power war with China. Multipolarity is only stable in the scope because of American hard power collapse. Collapse makes it unstable and collapses deterrence. Foresight 19. Structure matters. The unipolar moment, power diffusion, great power competition, concern, decline of Western economic influence require U.S. be more cautious. Multipolarity, underlying risk, diffusion of power will not eradicate great power. Adventure China's rise entail alliance reconfiguration and temptation to deploy conventional military power. Complexities, uncertainty of multipolarity. U.S. arsenal of weapons provide weapons proof ill-suited to deterrent great power war. Will provide occasion for its inadvertent onset. Advanced conventional technology proven in testing to other great powers. China embarking on military modernization. PLA still trails the U.S.'s great power trial revolution with the United States weapon advantage. National security experts revalidating the viability of deterrence. Multipolarity may store great complexity, additional great power, provide additional opportunities for miscalculating overreaction, and in China's sphere of influence causing great power war. Brands 20. Source influence caution fundamental tendency U.S. foreign policy would impede American trade and investment. The prospect of the world has returned China seeking primacy in Pacific areas using diplomatic and economic influence to draw country on into its orbit. The source influence world will become more perilous than safety. China's source influence will be coercion and authoritarianism. The U.S. will suffer economically. China is working toward Asian economies toward Beijing with the United States at severe disadvantage. Source influence during the Cold War causing a high-stakes crisis in which nuclear war was a real possibility. Nor did these fears prevent the two from competing violently throughout the Third World. Throughout history, source influence Athens, part of the UK, and Napoleon and France have ended in war. U.S.-China conventional war goes nuclear damage. 18. China's power goes so the risk of war with the United States. The prospect of competition going nuclear higher. The Pentagon's preference now of conventional warfare will be a recipe for nuclear escalation. Pentagon developed this formula in wars against none of which nuclear power. China has nuclear weapons intermingled with conventional force and making it difficult to attack one without the other. U.S. campaign targeting Chinese conventional forces with Russia's nuclear arsenal. China's leaders can use their weapons while they're able to. Its consequences will be devastating deterrence. So effective independently key to the slew of hotspots, hard powers necessary sufficient to shape the cost-benefit calculus of potential aggression alternatives. World War III Royal 17. During the Cold War, the world was safe because of deterrence. Enemies and peaceful nations knew the cause of these dangers could be revived using deterrence. Wars could break out anywhere. The flashpoint globally could lead to war. U.S. structure system to keep World War III at bay. Washington being terminal leading to Japan, South Korea, and the Saudi joined the nuclear club. India, Pakistan play daily nuclear cat and mouse game. The international system needs robust deterrence without war. The deals can be broken. Someone has to step on key order without deterrence. Gaddafi has saw what has happened to Saddam. Deterrence can keep sparks from uniting the flames. The best tool to keep from entering World War III. U.S. hard power is key to global cooperation. It solves every impact. Austrian 15. Most critical way to go to partners and terror aggression to confront potential aggressive such approach can enable the United States to sustain its role as a security partner of choice and card of choice the extinction nuclear winner. Scenario 17. Nuclear weapons are plausibly initiated mass extinction command arsenal of the U.S. and Russia likely lead to the prevailing times of climate scientists large-scale nuclear wars estimates where catastrophic growing season will be shortened by 100 days for the 3 years. The 1 in 5 billion ton will not be survival of the nuclear winter, resulting 40 million ton may be far more severe. The two emissions are conservative, incorporating crude oil storage in alone increasing generation by 6% deepening the winter following major nuclear war. Smoke cover about 30 to 40% of the Earth's surface plan. People are showing China should ban lethal autonomous weapons. The plan solves by 19. Most obvious situation of fully autonomous weapons could be deployed. The competition between the United States and China developers balance secrets to determine this difficult because the more difficult to demonstrate laws capability and for the U.S. and China to demonstrate the U.S. needs to maintain appearance of military dominance for service hegemony of China and demonstrate superior capacity and discourage from being one against China's hegemonic powers incubation period has already begun. The technology development is rapidly bringing that point. Of course, in the Astro Freedom Law, laws ban will mature and proliferate by 2025, generate geopolitical instability ban will be a treaty. Human Rights Watch 19. Facility legal definition of laws and self development and arms research and proliferation. The treaty prohibits use, development, production, national implementation laws, criminalizing violation and facility enforcement. Put away your imperatives that pursues an offensive, realistic emergent strategy. Change from the modern world that doesn't belong to the same people, also liberating nationalism, defensive realism that your cards think that we recognize the greatest threats to stay and handle the situation on a case by case basis. Policy 19. Recent developments of the international scene fit better with expectations of offensive realism than with alternative paradigms. The research of great power revisionism with China expanding series of influence in the way that offensive realism executed in the 90s. Washington FOPO, under liberal international worldview, assumed deepening economic engagement, great powers would diminish and card and diminish the standards, maximizing expectability and one prefer after specificity. Governments have to make trade-offs between every single action, which is that utilitarianism is the only moral philosophy that's able to actually take into account the aggregative trade-offs that the government has to make. Second is, yeah, that's fine. Cool. I'm ready for cross.
Cool. So I guess like starting on the first card, I guess it's kind of if the Bartlett evidence says that like China might be more advanced than the U.S. If that's the case, then like wouldn't like China be able to like I guess cause war and like win these war scenarios and like even post plan?
Well, no, because our Bartlett evidence indicates that one of the main reasons China is able to generate primacy over the United States is this rapid development of artificial autonomous weapons development. Our argument is that without this kind of technology, China would not be able to maintain hegemony over the United States.
Wait, but like, I guess the question is more so in like weapons in general, right? Because it says that if their tech is already more advanced, then like, why do they need more investments?
Well, because the evidence is not saying China's technology is more advanced in general. It's saying that artificial intelligence is creating this advancement. The plan gets rid of this advancement.
Why can't artificial intelligence be used for things like other than lethal autonomous weapons, like I guess determining where to have strikes and things like that? How is this an advantage that I guess can't be applied to other forms of military tactics, operations, etc., that would make China like still not like that would remove China's edge after the plan's implemented?
Yeah, sure. One, I think to answer your first argument, even if AI can be used for other things, China is not using this kind of autonomous weapon system for like beneficial things. They're using it to maintain primacy over the United States. Second is, wait, could you repeat your second question?
Well, okay, I think that's honestly the main one. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess going on to the second scenario, could you, I guess, walk me through the Brock evidence?
Yes. So the Brock evidence, So the Brock evidence is making a claim that the way that China is viewing war right now is that it's inevitable and that it's going to eventually happen. So they're massively developing an artificial intelligence and trying to get an edge over America. And our argument is that the plan gets rid of this edge.
Okay. That's fine. If the plan does get passed, what prevents China from just putting the same amount of resources into like other weapon systems?
One is I think that all of our evidence is very particularized to our artificial intelligence is a unique technological advancement that would kind of revolutionize warfare. I think one of our piece of evidence talks about how the fact that we don't need humans to oversee it, the fact that it can operate on its own creates a unique advantage. So even if China invests in other military, which, I don't contest that they won't necessarily, doesn't have the same effect.
All right.
Cool. While the 1NC is being sent out, let's talk a little bit about what the 1AC and 1AC cross-X. Who can tell me what the two scenarios, or who can tell me what the scenarios in the AF were? Rose, what were the scenarios?
One of them was miscalc between US and China, and the other one is US hard power collapse that would lead to great power war.
Okay, and which of those scenarios seemed stronger? Anyone have thoughts on which of those seemed like the better scenario? Madhav, what do you think?
Out of the two, I'm not really sure, but
Okay, anybody else? I saw you were starting to unmute yourself, Rose.
There's more like preemption of turns for the second scenario, so I think they'd be more prepared to go or like defend the second scenario.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about cross-X briefly. What do you think the neg is really trying to set up here in cross-X? Like, based on the questions they were asking, what holes do you think they're going to really try to punch in the affirmative case? Or what positions are they trying to set up?
War with China is inevitable, so it's not unique.
Yeah. Anything else?
Maybe like banning laws will cause a shift to Chinese spending in other weapons.
I think that's definitely reasonable. Yeah. Cool. Okay, we can do the 1 and C then.
All right. Also, I guess like if I'm not being like super clear, it's been like a while since I've had, yeah. So just like, but yeah. Is everyone ready?
You're muted.
That was unfortunate. Okay, I'm gonna start again. All right. Interrupt yapping not specify which states or states ought to ban lethal autonomous weapons, upper determine and adverb quantification determine whether bear pollutes existence so Leslie 16 existential upward entailing tax in the law industry the animals all must be another test gets where you can insert adverb quantification minimal change of meaning states as generic A point fails upper determine doesn't mean political entities ought to limit the laws of right competitive nuclear arrest can be applied to theirs a B point fails adverb quantification states generally ought to limit laws that means roughly the same as arrest always pragmatics 1 controls interlink people they prop off the rest states before argument 2 jurisdiction judges corrective but inside there are 3 seconds 3 you need a model of the topic before winning more pragmatic when 4 absent rule debate collapses you follow speech and we need to agree upon rules or else the structure of activity doesn't exist. Violation is that it's in the plain text for one limits millions of any combo of countries of laws expose that ground you cherry pick apps no economics all state line forces upholding shallow debates visually generic deal proper leverage I lose on specificity to TV area the absent advantage we get discussion non skin reason their after uniquely good voters for instance debate a competitive activity the better person education only protocol we take out around drop the win loss insurance future beats you dropping our chance to advocacy which creates a 760 when you read you often competing interest one year line is opportunity based on which you rather than the best one 2 levels off defensive venture broadline is competing interest to RBI one logic to work for reading T out with logic is a litmus test for argument 2 they encourage you to be abused of propaganda through enables us to return to get education rather than being T the whole time next off. Despite resistant CCP regime is stable, never chance completely risky cause lash up all 20 that CCP remains firmly empowered to achieve govern and modernize economic policy middle classes, but to be most influential who perceive the CCP responsible for their prosperity. Chinese community 2000 crisis fair, which better really legitimized by people CCP do proceed the growing middle class of violent social contract. The CCP could face a challenge to legitimacy, rise in social. This gets attempt to at least take advantage of credibility. CCP can only contain such dissent for longer continued civil unrest in groups, independent trade threats. Most significant threats is pronounced economic downturn and the plan. Eroded CCP legitimacy. She and CCP leadership had made laws that top priority for military economic superiority at Allen 18. When you first international competition both economic and military, she said that China was a country marches at the front ranks when it comes to research AI. China leadership pursue self-reliance AI technology with autonomous weapons using AI tech will be the basis of military power and the plan prompts domestic backlash and undermine CCP stability to be a Chinese foreign policy because 16 implement miscalculate a huge domestic backlash. China was heavily defensive and foreign encourages humiliation. Chinese sovereignty easily recover new sites of perceiving themselves domestic backlash as large. But foreign policy of the government seen as too weak of an endanger the initiative the CCP lead to the party being forced to jump to aggressive plus domestic opposition backlash prompts regional aggression escalates to 14 and battle governments often resort to external distractions to have a national assembly release press CCP legitimacy condition on social stability economic growth second largest economy modern field national economy just a new phase and power leadership could deflect anger by exploiting the SES right for expertise national assembly is sufficient to will foster fight thinking aircraft could do wonders in public opinion and SES conflict goes nuclear Tiklahova 15 China's willing to start nuclear war with the SES and China could resort to concrete measurement escalation concern nuclear states can asymmetric escalation to the islands China's 15 inches which would give reaching a defensive balance of result China would join first on the nuclear coordinated adventure with the West Asia provocation only way would manage going nuclear provocation to destabilize the whole region touch off unintended escalation towards military conflict next off. China, Russia, only China leapfrogging pushes Russia to the U.S. collectively continue to one. 19 China and Russia alliance guarding both countries rear the U.S. Beijing and Moscow will come closer to China. Russia minority steps with the U.S. different China becomes more powerful geographic proximity make China Russia after the key variables China also by vis-a-vis the United States for China continues to make advances. Military capabilities become more dominant joining Washington China balance Chinese power and Sino-Russian alliance across the U.S. for private cause instability in Russian regions. Sino-Russia energy is multiple deterrence gives America and ally Russia China enemies around the risk of being involved in accidental skirmishes Russian China interaction plot to transfer some make possible partners Sino-Russia Pakistan next Iran represents a challenge to India's influence and heralds a change the Baltic maritime power and Iran conflict is nuclear next year. 18 the art to build a nuclearization of the Indian Ocean would have a negative effect on security environment pushing towards the security trial actions into defend China in Islamabad during the war deterrence work because of because the patriarch of multipolar South Asia dialogue has been suspended since the year untested pushing deterrence would fail and nuclear threats of getting is no longer distant threat and only U.S. Russia will constitute other wars join Colton Barrett 17 all over the U.S. and Russia aftermath it would be slowing the atmosphere that cooling those last second to start in the nuclear war to extend 4,000 weapons making it possible to go through the threat of it would be great that only possible 90% of the weapons regional war unlikely to reach extent to another is great in conflict with the U.S. and Russia case. Starting at first as an overview, their arguments like their bear card literally says that China's already have the United States developed. I mean, this means that they can fuel extra. They can still have an advantage. AIA is not only using lethal bombs, so they could use it for specific hypersonic like targets in order to like and put the rest of the money towards there, which already puts them at an advantage now. And now there's also circumvention recent loopholes coming out in 2020. China seems eager to tie its own hand when it comes to the research of atomic weapons system. China contributed intent to deficit intelligence to prove confident enough to exclude types of weapons ability or develop China's first legal warfare seeking to exploit legal measures continuing to legitimize the adversary and framing their intelligence and not China specific like other countries like Russia feel in cause access to the influence of Chinese nuclear worse and you should hold their intelligence nuclear war high simply escalates and you have to generate scenario specificity for the cars on the bear evidence you have the union to try China's already winning Andrew 19th US has been releasing AI arms race to China level the playing field smart tokens and code cyber warfare AI battlefield development starting mostly unaware of the war the US has been clearly the China published more articles increase AI patterns White House leadership appearances coming strategy for China allocated military infrastructure specific companies reducing education and partly literally says that Chinese tech may not be more advanced so this was stated in prospects empirically just proves their offense used to be highly sampled scenarios if China's already Johnson Evans one not China specific control at the card other countries cause escalation like Russia 2 not escalation more cautious Chaka 20 AI so more cautious than humans about conclusion data is limited once you begin to take away sources of the machine check for all the stuff the humans the machine did better lowering confidence human judgment is more limited when it overestimated ability to outcomes and no aggressive Chinese sprint to parity the military is cautious prior to its controllability. County 18, it seems like the military unleashed fully killer robots. It seems that 2 nested the military controllability core China committed prior to this consolidated control military previously had a few facility negative reactions. Human role as supervising controllability. So party in CCP moderates a piece of innovation ensures incremental managerial advantages. Why 19 commercial because we enjoy the way the PLA China's prioritizing military civil fusion to higher control by the government will limit the amount of domestic affairs to pursue risky experiments and eventually leads to revolutionary as opposed to incremental advances. And China drive for regional hegemony is peaceful and not to some with the U.S. aggressive could incremental increase in nuclear here. 19 China pursuing hegemony East Asia not exclusive hostile hegemony not trying to exclude the U.S. and China being recognized that U.S. engagement being a peaceful point to China is not absurd in commercial freedom. China is more dependent on the Beijing wants to although Beijing domestically willing to use force not looking to do so the Chinese recognize that exclusive control over the neighbors is not achievable. China's ambitions for ultimate capabilities have grown. Beijing seems to be a certain response to external China's assertiveness reaction to perceived challenges willingness to settle for peace preeminence will depend heavily on whether the U.S. is trying to deny China this option and skip the next card. I know yes, China war strong domestic incentive that prior to stability and growth has been 19 that the United is China not until the back each country has a strong domestic incentive. China is obsessed with social stability and social alliance that the CP social stability overrides all other considerative foreign aggression sparks and misguided the war which disrupt the Chinese domestic stability cost of war enormous potential gains are limited. The U.S. China economic stability is simply too big to fail. Okay. Yeah, I just the second last card is the only one I skipped. So yeah.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So the China-Russia dissent, what the terminal impact, who fights in the IQR conflict?
Yeah. So yeah, okay. So in the conflict, it's more so that like power instability means that like there could be like wars between like any of like the like multiple powers in the region. So it could be it's essentially saying that tensions between
how does
what do you mean?
how does Russia get involved within a U.S.-China confrontation?
Um, so right now, essentially, the argument is that there's an alliance between Russia and China. So, and there's a conflict between India and China. So the argument is that in conflict between, like a conflict between a conflict involving China in the area is something that would lead to a war, given that the U.S. also has like allies with India.
The SCS conflict talks about how China is willing to start a nuclear war with the United States, and then your card on case says no U.S.-China war. How do these not contradict each other?
Okay, well, I mean, if there's like no U.S.-China war, the advantage doesn't have an impact. I mean, like, it's like,
So-
I don't know, it could be like an if-then, like if that's true, the advantage doesn't have an impact. Presumably, like this would go away
Okay,
too.
that makes sense. What kind of, who is kind of like, I guess, dissenting against the CCP right now?
Well, okay, I think there are like a few groups, right? So like you see like people like Uyghur Muslims, people in Tibet, etc. And a lot of like the support for the CCP is also contingent on current conditions, like a strong economy continuing right now. Yeah.
But how does China have like a strong economy, especially after like COVID? I guess my larger point is like,
Well, China did like empirically just better than other countries post COVID.
okay, sure.
Right.
Is the internal link to your impact premised on like the CCP collapsing, or is it based off just like instability causing CCP to lash out?
The latter.
Okay, so if it's the latter, then there have been times in which the CCP has been, I guess, unstable in the past. Why didn't they lash out then?
Yeah. So I think it's a question of like the degree. I think a couple of things is that right now, the argument that we're making is that it like without lethal autonomous weapons, like the CCP's like perception of power is greatly reduced. And essentially, if like they're perceived to be much weaker, they could also have damaged credibility. Or like I guess the answer to the question is more so like we haven't had anything to a similar scale that the dissent argues the AF would cause in terms of instability. That would apply to a broad enough portion of the population.
Okay. That's all, Rafi.
Cool. Okay, let's talk about the 1 and C. Which of these disads do you all think is the more threatening option for the 2 and R, and why? Emily, what do you think?
Maybe China, Russia, just because I already saw some ink on the other disad in CrossX, and I think maybe they're gonna make like some sort of uniqueness claim, but that's why I think China, Russia.
Okay, other thoughts? Anya, what do you think?
I also think China, Russia, just because it seems like it's a lot more in line with like the hard power like part of the 1AC. So
Okay, cool. And then some of the case arguments. Obviously, the 1 and C has a bunch of case arguments. If you're giving Johnny's 1AR, what case argument are you most going to be focusing on? Which ones seem like the most imperative ones that the 2 and R is really preparing itself to go for? Rose, what do you think?
Well, if the AF wants to go to the route of like great power with China, then they need to be really careful because the 2 and R, well, they seem like the next seem really prepared to just argue why China is like peaceful and there wouldn't be any great power war if the AF wanted to go that route.
Okay. Are there any arguments this 1 and C that you think are just total throwaways? Like, do you think the T argument is not a serious threat? Any case arguments that you're like, that was sort of a thing the 1AR can blow off? Madhav?
Was it if the 1AR can just like ignore it?
Not like ignore, but like arguments that you would not be very concerned about if you're giving this 1AR.
Probably the T argument.
How come?
I just think that like the most of the time allocation for the 1 and C was on like the disads and the case. So like unless like it gets like it has like super weak responses in the 1AR, it's completely dropped. I just don't think that it wouldn't be like a strategic option for the 2NR, so probably shouldn't be like responded to that heavily.
Okay. How much time do you think would be appropriate then for T?
For the 1AR?
Mhm.
Maybe like no more than, I'd say like less than a minute.
Cool. Other people agree or disagree about T? Come on, everyone's got to have an opinion.
I agree, but I also think like the uniqueness stuff, like the Andrew card, I feel like it's probably not that important because Bartlett is way more recent and yeah. Like the uniqueness stuff.
Fair enough. Johnny, you good for the 1AR or need more time?
I'm good.
Cool. Okay, let's do it.
The order is advantage 1. Or no, sorry, it's advantage 2 first, then advantage 1. Topicality, the sheet is sad, China, Russia. Okay, is everyone good? Cool. China is leapfrogging the United States with lethal autonomous weapons development right now, and the only thing that can stop it is the ban on lethal autonomous weapons. Their overview where evidence in the context of lethal autonomous weapons, not just artificial intelligence. No circumvention. A1 counter-interpretation. The affirmative is durable fiat for domestic countries. The standard is AF ground for domestic countries in particular. The negative and just rated uniqueness evidence back at them and say that the plan would never pass, which means that the affirmative functionally has no ground and all for offense on Naval for why specification is good is offense for why this particular AF ground is good. Second is that China is not just some kind of gangster who wants to develop lethal autonomous weapons for the sake of developing it. They are also legitimacy seeking people, which means that if they commit to a ban, they're going to follow it and follow these particular institutions. Yes, it is specific to China. We have made arguments that that China specifically is able to develop lethal autonomous weapons, develop countries that in a manner that Russia is not able to do so. China might be winning right now, but the plan stops them from winning by stopping their lethal autonomous weapons production. Bartlett definitely flows from it. It says that artificial intelligence is the thing that makes technology advanced, not just technology. The Johnson evidence is very contextualized to China. There are no alternative causes. It talks about Chinese submarines and no other kind of submarines from other particular countries. Yes, China's sprint to parity. They have considered several examples of China has been expansionist in the past. For example, the foreign policy towards Taiwan is very, very aggressive. Yes, U.S.-China war, but yes, U.S.-China war, they are massively expansionist. That was above, but even if they win this argument, it takes out both of their terminal impacts on the disaster. One counter to British Africa substance say substance proven generics and be intent. Generic statements require little evidence to be true. Few participate in mosquitoes carry West Nile virus. 1% are carriers only a minority of lay eggs, but birds lay eggs uncontroversial empirically. The prevalence level sufficient to justify generic statement true is definitely lower. Second, debate solves arbitrary linguistic intuition. We all interpret the rest of the law spec and determine the most particular interprets on pragmatic checks like clash elements, floors on a ceiling. A sufficiently particular interpret the topic means division of ground is more important. 3, clash force in-depth research which leads to nuanced debates about the implication of banning laws for various states. 4, Afghan no TVA, no advantage applies to all places. Cause each state has different geopolitics and laws. Picks Mule TVA and are worse than planned cause. Next, generics like the NC sent case, but asked to have numbers to pick. 5, terminal defense. There are way more state picks than asked because they only need 2 cards. Very few viable and distinct asks, and they over limit to 1 app. 6, functional limit swallow inches lose the case. NC's regulation counterpoint. 7, over limits their model makes their 1 app on the top. 6, generics checks that was above. 7, reasonability voting that requires sacrificing subset which is abuse on T has to outweigh the abuse of voting on T. 8, 9, no jurisdiction judge to vote on non-T apps all the time. There's no intrinsic rules in debate. 10, this Nemo shell is a joke. It does not have an offensive case list. It doesn't have a defensive case list. It did not extrapolate the precision impact basis besides just people prep off the res. Do not allow new 2NR extrapolations of this app. What hegemony definitely checks back CCP legitimacy. Our brand's evidence indicates that U.S. fiercely influence checked by Chinese expansionist policies, which solves for the terminal impacts like in lack of hegemony problems. CCP legitimacy reason why the case terms that disad faster than the disad terms the F3 no link ally 19 is in the context of AI technology in general, not just lethal tolerance weapons. 4, the S at the threshold of the link to literally nothing, i.e., any instability causes foreign erratic policy that triggers the impact, which means that any thumper is necessary to check back the disad. No impacts. 5, no impact to CCP legitimacy. Shina, Ernest 18. Putting men in repressive capabilities, weakers, and deficit, entire families and practice for others, the fear of repression enough impossible to know that. How many disagree? Few dare to speak out. 6, differentiated war theory doesn't apply to she. No last round plan solid. Lean. And team. She's adopted to anxiety, domestic repression, and foreign aggression, differentiated war theories. Does not hold for she domestic troubles and card domestic troubles. 1, doesn't crush U.S. hegemony brains against that U.S. hard power is able to check back against expansion and policy. 2nd, their impact is a joke. Scene doesn't say anything about crushing U.S. foreign power. It is power tag. Merely says that there might be a shift in maritime policy. 3, Russia-China alliance secures China's second strike. Barterman. 10, 11. Important Russia early warning know how to China implies a military alliance. The Russia providing China with a system know how to counter U.S. strikes, develop second strike, powerful long range radars and counter radars, and China's second strike security destabilizes every Asian data goes nuclear champion. 10, turn nuclear modernization with support assertiveness in Asia. Nuclear submarine support 1880 to turn U.S. military to support military Asia. China shift resources toward power projection expansion, transfer preparing this military for the STC and cyber weapons and counter cyber weapons.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about that a little bit. So what do you all think some of the strengths were of that 1AR? Or weaknesses, strengths or weaknesses?
I thought Neeblety was covered very well, and it would make it very difficult for the neg to go for that.
What arguments on Neeblety do you think were especially good?
I think there was just a lot of ink on it in general. I think the arbitrary linguistics argument was good. I think that covered like existential and then pragmatics that way. And there's pretty good line by line also.
Cool. What were some other strengths or weaknesses of the 1AR?
I thought the coverage on the CCP disad was pretty good, and I liked how they used their own evidence against them in the 1AR.
Okay. What should the 2NR go for? Rose, what do you think 2NR should go for?
I'll admit, I was a little distracted at the end because I was trying to open the doc, but I don't think they spent much time on the China-Russia alliance part.
Okay, so you'd say China-Russia alliance disad plus case defense, maybe? Okay. Do people agree with Rose or disagree? Madhav, do you agree or disagree by going for the China-Russia disad?
I agree. I only flowed like 2 responses to the China-Russia war disad. Whereas like all the other ones were pretty well like covered.
Okay, I guess final question, some of the case debate. Are there any arguments on case that you think Johnny really maybe blew off, didn't spend enough time on, that like would make the case debate kind of hard for him? Or do you think that the case is in a perfectly good spot after the 1AR? Emily?
I thought there was a lot of defense from the neg's responses, but I think the thing about China hedge being peaceful, there were a lot of cards on that, and those weren't line by line. It's like maybe that could be a point of trouble, but I don't think that's huge because there were some things about like historical foreign policy towards Taiwan. I think if you could bring in those examples, that would also be persuasive.
Okay, fair enough. Rohan, are you good for the 2NR or need a little more time?
Yeah, I have like probably just gonna take a bit more prep. I have like 45 seconds left or something.
Okay,
So.
that's good enough time for one more question then. Okay, let's say the neg does go for T. What do you all think some of the paths to victory for the neg might be on T? Things the 1AR maybe wasn't as good on.
The 1AR makes like a lot of arguments, but they're very short, so it probably won't take as long for them to cover all the arguments because they probably have to spend a lot less time on them since they're not as fleshed out.
It makes sense. You're saying a very thorough 2NR can sort of cut through the noise. Okay. Any other people agree or disagree? Okay, I'll take that as concurrence. I think that's about time, Rohan, if you're good to go.
Yeah, okay. I just had to make sure I wasn't muted. So the 2NR is going to be T. Yeah, so let me know when you're ready. Like I'll start off with an overview, I guess, like, and I'll just sign most of them. Yeah.
Okay, I'm good.
All right. The 1AR barely did any work on the semantics portion of the debate. I'm going to go for the semantics claim, and I'm going to concede defense limits the ground, which means that the terms go away. The implication of me winning semantics is that the counter standards impact back to basically nothing. They have to prove that the definition connect and semantics come before everything else. Well, the rules that we follow, even the 1AR time crunch, you don't go over to speech time. It would be fair for you to do so, but the rules have activity prevent you from doing so. This outweighs and if the argument verifies, A point, it verifies that you already conceded semantics first. B point, unback prag means that debate collapses because people won't follow speech times and show up to correct time repairs. Outweighs all of your offenses. It assumes that debate exists in the first place. Two is that pragmatic debates are unverifiable. There's no way in metric to define how much literal ground is lost under any term for semantics because we use definition metrics, like how many times an article has been cited, credentials, have more to understanding of the topic. It means that you reject your arguments because you can't evaluate that portion of the debate. Three sides of link different things are education for different people, and unfairness will always exist due to resource disparity. This means any risk of semantics matter. It means that you should win, even if you think that like the debate is muddled. This should be the tiebreaker, and like even if that's the case, there are pragmatic steps. It would still collapse, and like even if you think that there's some or like semblance of argument about why like the impact of semantics collapse and pragmatic argument is that that those internal links would outweigh and if you're links to fairness and education. 8-point predictability. We do prep on the definition. You find the topic, you just find people walking to the right blind controls the internal link to fairness and education. If we don't have prep, we literally can't win. B point. Freezes action. Pragmatic debate results in a race to chopper. People just read theory shells based on minuscule violations. We'll be debating about what's most for educational set of the topic, so we never get anything out of the activity, proving that it's self-defeating. C-point authority committee spends hours defining a resolution should be educational, have equal ground on both sides, which always because they've been in debate for a long time. The specific arguments, gonna actually wait. Let me answer the reasonability thing first. Yeah. This reasonability argument is literally 2 seconds and just says that and it's like really bad. It also doesn't make sense. You can't be reasonably semantically correct. You also concede all for competing interest justifications, which means that it always which means that we outweigh strength of link. Just extend the first one. Your violence just arbitrary and based on what you did, which means that the 2AR doesn't get any recourse on any of these arguments. Yeah. So I guess now the Leslie evidence. Leslie outweighs their Stimpian evidence for a bunch of reasons, and winning the Leslie evidence should be sufficient for me to win the round. First, that provides a very specific metric in order to determine like what counts as a bare plural and what, like a generic and existential bare plural, which means that you should definitely prefer arguments. They've conceded 4 reasons why semantics outweighs. We've already talked about that at the top, but like their mosquito evidence is that first it doesn't specify a subset of like the 1%. The difference, like I guess the problem with the evidence that they read is that like it says that 1% of mosquitoes, obviously like a generic bare plural is not like universal. It doesn't say everything needs to be like under the case of the resolution. It just says that like you can't specify like these 3 mosquitoes to prove the generic statement, which is like the problem with the evidence. Second, to misunderstand generic, the difference between a generic bare plural and a universal quantifier. Third is that it's using evidence to be true. Like you also just specify like one country, which means that you don't even meet the burden of like 1%, which and like they also don't get new responses less the evidence. They completely just drop this card. Their Stimpian evidence is like pretty bad, which means that they're definitively behind. Like if they do responses or do any weighing, like it's just new arguments to the truth, which means that you should just reject it, which means that we're winning the definition debate on a strength of link basis, which means that you should definitely err neg here. I guess like the pragmatic stuff. it should probably be game over that they've conceived like 4 justifications for why semantics come before pragmatics in the first speech. Yeah, jurisdiction might be incorrect, but like you've conceded this like debate collapses argument. That even if you went some internal link type of argument, we definitely still outweigh because we've already quantified like the impact to this. We've already quantified the impact to like the pragmatic impact on this in the first speech, and given weighing arguments as 2NR, like you should like have a very high line for new weighing arguments that they could make. Now I guess the only argument they have is like this debate solves like arbitrary linguistic intuitions, but first that we could just like determine like which definition is more correct. Like we obviously have like linguistics for a reason in order to do things like laws and policy making, which means that there are terminal impacts to things like this, and also doesn't make any sense. We can have a rough idea insofar as like we can look at things like strength of link, and also which means that you should definitely error side. You said a pragmatic model. You said a topicality is a floor, not a ceiling, but this is obviously absurd. Our argument is saying that you don't meet the floor. A sufficiently predictable interim is not enough. Our argument is saying that like you're just not topical, and things like division of grounded are more important. Like you should just like look at like what the 1AR said. It was like 5 words without like a single warn. Like their arguments are just straight up not justified over here. But even if that's the case, like we're not saying that like you need to be more and more semantically accurate. It doesn't work like pragmatic. It's like kind of a binary condition. You're either topical or you're not. Our argument is saying that like if you are topical, that means that you meet the floor, and then we can have like debates about like what types of affirmatives are more fair or less fair, and you could just read specifically your arguments in that. But our argument is that like topicality is a floor. Okay, so just gonna take some time to like clear this up. So first, semantics comes before pragmatics. Like there's barely any work done on this question. They conceded like 3 of the 4 like reasons why semantics comes first. Even if they try to like use this like floor not a ceiling as some like really sketch like controls the internal link argument, like we've already proven that we won under that model. They just conceded the Leslie evidence, which means that the fact that I put some ink on their arguments should be sufficient for me to win the round. Leslie is also just vastly superior, and then like which means that like they also don't get new weighing because it would just be new in the 2AR. They've made these arguments. There's just like 0 work done on the semantics layer of debate when they're like reasons why it outweighs, and like we've proven our evidence is just straight up better.
Hey, what are some strengths and weaknesses of the 2NR? Anya, what do you think?
I think the 2NR is good in the fact that it goes really hard on the Leslie evidence and compares it to the Sympian evidence pretty well. Like the mosquito example, or like they contest why the upward entailment test is like a better metric, and also they say something about how like there's a problem with Sympian in the fact that you can't specify something. I didn't get the whole example, but yeah.
Okay, other people's thoughts on strengths and weaknesses.
I did think that one good argument was they answered reasonability pretty well, that you can't be reasonably semantic, it outweighs on strength of link. And they did add that the AF did spec 1 state, which is probably worse than like a subset. So I think that was pretty good on reasonability.
Okay, do people think it was the right choice to go all in on semantics as opposed to maybe going for both semantics and pragmatics, or just going for pragmatics? Rose?
I think that it's fine to go all in on one, but well, I guess this isn't all in then, but I think it would be on the safer side still to answer their other standards or like line by line, and just in case like they're able to win, that you should take I think it was semantics over pragmatics to be safe.
Okay, other people, what do they think? What do you think?
I also think that there should have been a line by line standards. I feel like the last like 1 to 2 minutes of the speech was like kind of like repetitive because they talked about the Leslie evidence as well as the like semantics versus pragmatics debate, which is talked about earlier in the speech as well. So I think that the original like strategy was to only go for semantics because it would take too much time to go for both. But like looking back on the speech, I think that there's sufficient time to go for standards.
Okay, cool. With that in mind, let's do the 2AR. Unless you still have prep, Johnny.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Is everyone good? Order's gonna be totality, well, obviously, and it's gonna be on the arbitrary linguistic intuition stuff. Cool. Everyone good? Cool. They have not really extrapolated an external impact of precision other than predictability, which is an internal link that only matters under pragmatics. This means that the central question of this debate is not whether who is more grammatically correct according to what Leslie thinks, but rather who has the best vision of the topic. There's two framing questions to their offense that they just can straight up consider. One is that linguistic intuitions are are arbitrary. Obviously, not every single person ever knows what the output and tailwind test, what bare plurals are, etc., etc. Likewise, significant portions of our community intuit subsets to be topical and share different intuitions from you, which shows that it's not an objective norm that you abide by, which is all of their which is what all of their offense relies upon, the notion that there's some kind of objective external norm and rule that we can follow, but rather it is completely subjective, which makes inroads into all of their impacts that they went for in the 2 and R. Second dropped argument is that predictability is based on community norms. The first thing policy teams think about when receiving the resolution is not what one person thought about in 2015, but rather what do authors write about, what is in the literature. Then we prepare negative positions based on the literature. This proves that the topic is not the only objective division and ground, a reason why you should default to pragmatics. At the top of their line by line, the no 2AR weighing. Yes, we got new 2AR weighing because all of your weighing was new in the 2NR. Look at their explanation of the voters in the 1NC. It was, quote, you need a model of the debate topic before winning a more pragmatic one. If they get to blow up a 1 second explanation of impact for 4 minutes in the 2NR, we get some leeway to here. And obviously we got new 2AR weighing. Having a good model debate obviously outweighs verifiability. They have not extrapolated an external impact to following a rule. Obviously, following a rule for the sake of following a rule is nonsense, especially when the rule does not promote good models of debate. It'd be a ridiculous model of debate if we just followed a rule and it led to absolutely no clash, no education, no fairness, etc., etc. And we just followed that rule because we say that it's an objective interpretation, which we have already made inroads to there, which means that obviously all of our impacts that way, it should default to a pragmatic model debate. The verifiabilities weighing is complete nonsense. One, it's new, so we get new 2AR weighing responses to it, obviously, and they just straight up drop that semantic debates are less verifiable because they require arbitrary linguistic intuitions, they require complex grammatical norms, etc., that require the judge to posit their own subjective understandings into the resolution, which means that semantics is even less verifiable, and you should default to a pragmatic model debate. The last argument is that all of the arguments about just following a rule is nonsense, especially when we have proposed a rule itself. Ultimately, their model debate is just following rules is good. We have a counter interpretation, which means that we'll follow rule. Now we have definitely one pragmatics. We'll just extend our AF ground offense under a model of a whole res model debate. They can read an infinite number of picks, they mute the entirety of the affirmative ground, and they cause the limits explosion in the other way, which means that ultimately the affirmative will lose every single kind of debate. Pragmatics comes for semantics, and they just straight up drop their AF ground offense, which means that even if you use strength and link, we win the debate.
Okay, cool. Let's now all take about 5 or 6 minutes, let's say till 8:57, to come up with RFDs for this debate. So at 8:57, we'll reconvene with decisions. Okay, let's do some decisions. Anyone want to volunteer their decision?
Okay, I can go. I think the AF turned the shell sufficiently, and the 2NR didn't have a huge impact calculus and wasn't particularized to how choosing China in this topic would like drastically narrow the topic literature or outweigh unpredictability. And like paired with the argument that the abuse on T had to outweigh the AF choosing China, I think I needed more impacting to make this issue flow neg. And since the AF did turn the shell at the end, that was my decision.
Okay, anybody else want to give theirs? Anybody else? Okay, we'll try something different. Johnny, I want you to give a decision for Rohan.
So I think a decision for Rohan would be on the verifiability. Sorry, I didn't even say that word correctly in the 2AR, but like verifiability weighing claim that the only kind of external impact in this round would be following a rule, and that comes as like an a priori question because it's a question of following rules versus everything else kind of being like a procedure. And also like I would also vote on like the weighing claims about how like all of the kind of pragmatic model of debate kind of incentivizes more maybe like theory debates, incentivizes debates that can't be resolved, in the kind of meta level weighing that was there.
Okay, Rohan, what about a decision for Johnny?
Yeah, so I think it would probably revolve around like the arbitrary linguistic intuitions argument. Not sure if I got the order of those words correct, but yeah, so I think it'd probably resolve around implicating that to, I guess, nullify a lot of the impact of, I guess, viewing topicality as like a binary condition. And then like, so that'd probably be like the main chunk. And then also just like, I guess like the rest of the 2AR, like sufficiently winning that the pragmatic offense on T is like, I guess, outweighs the, like some of like the pragmatic implications the 2NR made, like of being non-topical. Like, I'm not sure if I phrased that correctly, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Anyone have questions they want to talk about before we wrap up for tonight?
I have a question. On the neg, I caught that they said no RVIs, but was there ever an RVI argument on the app?
I don't believe so. I think that was more just, crossing your I's, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, so to speak. The 2NR just mentions it's the 2AR, so judge isn't confused, but it's not strictly necessary. You're right. Okay, other questions? All right, if nothing else, thanks for showing up and good job, guys. Good debate.
Debate, Rohan.
Cool.
Yeah, good debate.